Hey, horror fans! Once again, it is me, the Horror Mizumani G. Yes, continuing my Exorcist film series. Yes, it's time to review the latest entry into the film, the first of a planned trilogy from David Gordon Green. Yes, it is The Exorcist Believer. Yes.
Don't fuck with them hoes.
Now, The Exorcist Believer is a 2023 American supernatural horror film. It was directed by David Gordon Green. It was written by Steven Splatter and David Gordon Green, based upon the characters created by William Peter Batley. Now, the film stars Leslie Odom Jr., Ann Dow, Jennifer Nettles, Norbert Leo Butts, Lydia Jewett, Olivia Markram, and Ellen Burstyn. Ooh. Now, in this film, when two girls disappear in the woods and return 3 days later with no memory of what happened to them, the father of one girl seeks out Chris McNeil, who's been forever altered by what happened to her daughter 50 years ago. Yes, 50 years ago. Now, once again, I'm sure everyone knows that my favorite horror movie of all time is The Exorcist. It is considered one of the scariest horror films ever made and has made a cultural impact when it comes to horror films. At the time, I said it before, you never saw a horror film like The Exorcist before. That's why it made such a cultural impact, and many people do consider it, such as myself, as one of the greatest horror films ever made. So when movie studios started remaking horror films such as the Big Three, that would be Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, among other horror fans such as horror fans didn't want anyone to do a remake of The Exorcist. Now, I myself said that, look, remakes are going to be made because that's what Hollywood wants to do. They want to remake horror films because they feel as though that now with modern horror, there is a market for younger fans who did not see The Exorcist when it first came out in 1973 are now ready to see this version again and put a modern spin on it. But because some of the backlash horror fans have when it comes to remake, it seems that filmmakers have found a way around making remakes of certain horror films, such as The Exorcist. Now, instead of doing a remake, what they can do is make direct sequels of certain horror films while ignoring events that took place in the sequels of the original film. That's what we seem to be doing. They've done that a lot, especially with Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a prime example. We've had at least maybe two or three films in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that claim that they are the direct sequel of the original 1975 film and ignore all the events that took place in the other sequels. Yeah, that's what seems to be doing. Now they did remake Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I thought was a pretty good remake, and they actually did a sequel to the remake. But it seems like films like The Exorcist and Jaws, a lot of people do not want to see a remake of Jaws, just like no one see a remake of The Exorcist. But what they can do is say, instead of just trying to remake that film, let's just make a brand new sequel and we retcon all the events that happened in the other sequels to that franchise. That's what we saw in the Halloween trilogy. Now, David Gordon Green, who recently completed his Halloween trilogy that retconned the Michael Myers Laurie Strode relationship, now brings us his entry into a first of a planned trilogy, this one called The Exorcist Believer. Now, after seeing the tragedy that takes place in Haiti, we're introduced to Victor Fielding, who is raising his daughter Angela on his own. Now, Angela and her friend Catherine decide to take a walk in the woods after school to perform a ritual where they certainly disappear without a trace. Now, both Victor, along with Catherine's parents, Tony and Miranda, frantically search for the girls, and then they're suddenly found 3 days later. Wow! Now, the girls have no memory of what happened to them, but both start to act wildly strange and start speaking in tongues. Now, this will lead Victor to reach out to the only person he believes that can save the girls, Chris McNeil, a mother whose daughter was possessed and an accident was performed successfully 50 years ago. But can she help Victor save Angela and Catherine from this new possessed demon? Well, that's what the movie is all about. No, first off, horror fans, I'm not going to talk about David Gordon Green and how he ended his Halloween trilogy. That's been done to death. I'm not going to talk about them. Well, we all know about that. Then that's that. Now, it's obvious Universal, who paid a lot of money to get the rights from The Exorcist, believed that he was the right person to make this trilogy. Again, it's not a remake of The Exorcist. All it is just a direct sequel from the original film, taking place 50 years from that time, while ignoring all the events in the other films. But I'm pretty sure everyone wants to forget Exorcist to the Heretic. Now, I will give David Gordon Green credit for trying to do something different, as this film isn't the typical possession exorcism film that we've seen before in the subgenre. He takes a different approach here. And I actually do like the idea of having two girls as possessed, as it should raise the stakes, especially during the exorcism. I was looking forward to seeing how they wanted to play this. And at times, there are some good moments in the film, as I like the interaction Victor has with Angela. They seem to have a pretty good relationship despite the fact what happened in the early part of the film. However, I wish they would have explored more in this relationship, as they have a very interesting dynamic between them. Would have loved to see more about their relationship. How does she feel about her father? Does she know anything about her mother? We only get a simple glance of it at the beginning of the film, but it's never explored anything more. And I think that was a huge mistake. I mean, let's not even talk about Catherine and her family, as we get no type of character development other than a few brief moments we've seen between Miranda and Tony regarding their beliefs. None of that is also not explored. I wanted to see a little bit more of her family dynamic. That would have actually been better to see a little bit more about her family. We get introduced to Angela and her father. We get introduced to Catherine and her family. I mean, obviously, there are two different types of families. The film should have explored that aspect more. The film doesn't even explore the friendship between Angela and Catherine, and would have added another element of suspense that the film seems to be lacking sometimes. For an Exorcist film, the one problem and another problem I do have is that there is no real tension and suspense in this film. I don't know what David Gordon Green was thinking about, but because of the lack of character development or the lack of exploring the relationship between Angela and Catherine, we don't get the tension and suspense happening when the two girls start to become possessed. Well, it was nice seeing Ellen Burstyn return as Chris McNeil, and while she does play an important role, it doesn't seem to have the impact that the filmmakers are looking for. I mean, that's basically why you want to bring her back. You want to have that decent impact. And not saying she does a good job, because they do love the interaction she and Victor have, but it's not the type of impact that I believe that Green and the filmmakers were looking for. Now, at least the acting is fine, as Leslie Odom Jr. does a fine job as Victor. He plays a man who is very desperate to save his daughter, despite the fact he lost his faith in their religion. I think that's what David Gordon Green and the other writers were going for, because it is believer. We have a man who seems to have lacked faith based upon what happened in the early part of the film, and we got to get him to be a believer, so that way he can save his daughter. I believe that's the aspect that he wanted to go, but unfortunately they don't do a good enough job in exploring that aspect of his character. Now, of course, veteran actress Ann Dow is great as Paula. She plays a nurse who has a secret and a past that possessed girls try to use against her. She seems very caring, a very caring person. She's very knowledgeable. And like I said before, that's what Ann Dow does. Whatever role she plays in, she does a very great job on it of it. Now, as I stated earlier, I like the fact that Green doesn't use the typical possessed stunts that we've seen before in this subgenre. We don't get that creepy crawling or the head turning like that. And no, we get a spit scene, but not nothing that we've seen before. We don't get people cursing like that. Now, there is a secret that is revealed that raises the stakes during the third act of the film, which I thought was pretty decent. I did not expect that, so we'll give him credit for that, and the fact that this is not your typical Exorcist possession film. No, I've seen and heard some negative things about this film, and a lot of people are saying it doesn't have the type of impact that they were expecting. Now, I wasn't expecting this film to have the same type of impact that The Exorcist had back in 1973. You're simply not going to get that. To try to duplicate what William Peter Badley and William Fredrickson did in 1970, you're just not going to get that. You're going to have some horror films that are just as good as The Exorcist, like Insidious and Hereditary and The Conjuring, but it's just not going to have that same type of impact. Now, I did expect this film to be very good and decent, but what Green has given us is a film that has some potential, but it just misses the mark. It's you're waiting for something to happen, and it really doesn't happen. Now, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are probably going to complain about the Exorcist scene. I won't reveal what happens in there. Like I said, there is a secret that gets revealed that kind of raises the stakes, but I expected something a little bit more. Now, I'm guessing that what he and the filmmakers thought was something very good on paper. Sometimes, you write it and it looks good, and I'm pretty sure it probably sound well when they did the read through, but it didn't reach the type of heights that most horror fans believe that it should. Now, for me, it's going to be interesting to see what Green and the filmmakers do now, as this is the first film of a planned trilogy, and unfortunately, it's off to a pretty rocky start. So I'm going to give Exorcist the Believer only 2 out of my 5 bloody gold coins. It's not a bad horror film like some people believe that it is. It's not the worst horror film I've seen so far this year. I've seen worse horror films than this film. I've seen worse Exorcist possession film than this film. But I expected something a little bit better, way better than what we got here. So for me, only 2 out of my 5 bloody gold coins. So there you have it, horror fans. That is my review and video of The Exorcist Believer. I hope you did enjoy it. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up, like, and share because it really does help out with that YouTube algorithm. Also, what do you thought about The Exorcist Believer? Have you seen it? What do you thought about it? Were you disappointed in the film? Did you actually like it, or do you think it's one of the worst horror films so far this year? Leave your comments in the comment section below to tell you what you thought about the film. Also, if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell. That way, we notify anytime when I put up new videos such as this one. Once again, my name is Lamont Smith, better known as the Horror Miser Money G, and always remember that horror rules. I see you in my next video. And guys, stay safe out there.